Yogah Karmasu Kaushalam.
Dear students, thank you for remaining tuned to this MOOC course on fish and fisheries. Today, we will be learning schooling, parental care and migration in fishes. The main objectives of this module are to understand the concept of social behavior in fishes, to discuss schooling as the most widespread fish behavior along with its specificity in various fish species, to define phenomenon of parental care, to describe different forms of parental care in fishes, to overview the migration processes in fishes, list the migratory fishes and study the types of migration, to describe distinct methods of migrations, causes of migrations and different factors that influence the fish migration, to elaborate 4 different patterns of fish migrations and to summarize the lecture. We will be studying this module in 3 parts, that is schooling in fishes, parental care in fishes and migration in fishes. Starting with schooling in fishes. The majority of 24,000 known fish species form cohesive social groups at some stage of their life history. Social groups occur because animals choose to stay with their own kind to gain individual benefit. Grouping for extrinsic reasons such as food, shelter from the current or oxygen availability is known as aggregation. Social groups of birds are termed as flocks, mammals live in herds and fish in shoals. The internal organization of such groups and patterns of relationships may differ widely depending on fish species, mode of life, age, motivation as well as on many biotic and abiotic factors of environment. Contacts and interactions between individuals within a group are based on various social behavioral responses. Social behavior is a complex concept including schooling, group, parenting, territorial and other behaviors. It incorporates several important characteristics of fish biology such as overall strategy of space utilization, foraging mode, avoiding predators and reproduction. Schooling behavior is one of the most widespread forms of social behavior in fish and is observed in numerous fish species. The aggregation of fish into a highly integrated supergroup leads to an emergence of a qualitatively different behavioral pattern, very different from behavior of the constituent individuals. The biological significance of schooling behavior is extremely high and concerns a wide variety of adaptive functions. The fish schools are characterized by tight relationships between individuals and close coordination of their behavior. Compact schools in which all fishes have same orientation and a very coordinated behavior are usually very easy to distinguish. Schooling is characterized by extreme complexity as it depends on environmental factors and other conditions such as illumination, current, habitat type and presence of predators. Thus, there is possibility of a range of schooling types depending on age, physiological state and other factors such as habitat type, activity, motivation, environmental conditions, etc. In many cases, only one form of schooling behavior is considered as school, mainly when all individuals within the group are oriented in same direction, situated at certain distance from each other and retain their unitary nature during movements. The same orientation and action synchronization are often considered the main characteristics of schooling behavior. The term school is restricted to coordinated swimming groups of fishes. School is a temporary group of individuals, usually of the same species and on the same stage of ontogeny. These individuals actively maintain mutual contact and exhibit coordination in their actions, benefiting all individuals in the group. The external appearance of the school may differ significantly depending on environment and condition. The species that schools a lot are termed as obligate or frequent schoolers, while those that school occasionally are termed as facultative or occasional schoolers. The term shoal represent simple spatial aggregations of fish attracted by certain stimuli, for example, food, temperature, light, olfactory stimuli, etc. The fishes of similar size tend to shoal and school together. The aggregation of individuals into shoals occurs individually, that is, independent of each another. In shoals, fish do not exhibit mutual attraction. They even lack unitary orientation and synchronization of movements in response to external stimuli. The internal structures are lacking in fish shoals, and individuals have no relationships to each other with respect to particular function. The fish density in shoals is usually lower than in schools. Fish shoals may form even without any relationship with schooling behavior. Shoaling also includes various transitory forms, for example, those arising when a shoal stops for feeding or rest and the group lose its unitary orientation. Thus, shoal is broader than school such that each school is a shoal but not necessarily vice versa. Further, we study distribution of schooling in fishes. The schooling style is characteristic of all fishes. It is observed in species with different ecology and systematics inhabiting various marine and freshwater habitats in low as well as high latitudes. Schooling behavior is common in young and adult fish, predators and prey, and marine and freshwater fishes. However, it is the chief characteristic of open water fishes, especially in those species that are characterized by seasonal, spawning and other migrations. There exist many schooling fishes among near shore demersal regions, for example, the family Mulidae inhabiting homogeneous sand habitats lacking shelter. According to estimates, about 25% of all fish exhibit schooling behavior their whole life, and about 50% exhibit schooling during larvae and juvenile stages of ontogeny. There are no schooling fish among deep sea and cave fish, as well as among nocturnal and cryptic fish spending most of their time in shelters. There are very few near shore schooling fishes, as they are less active, have individual home ranges and do not migrate. Schooling fish are almost absent among inhabitants of fast mountain streams and very turbid reservoirs. Unlike solitary fish species, schooling fish have neither individual defensive morphological traits like spines, thorns and poison glands, nor any threatening displays. This is the reason they resort to selfish herding theory for selective advantage of better individual survival. Active parental care is not typical in schooling fish, even though there are some notable exceptions. For example, Gasterosteus aculeatus, in which the male builds and guards nest during reproductive period, but all other times exhibits typical schooling lifestyle together with females and young. There is a continuum between schooling and non-schooling species. There are species which cannot live alone and for which schooling is the only appropriate strategy. For example, isolated individuals of Atlantic herring, Clupea herringus, die a few days after isolation from school due to strong stress caused by social deprivation. Many schooling fish retain this behavior for most of their life cycle, and there is only a limited time during reproduction when this fish live alone or in family groups. The Pacific pilchard Sardinops sagax melanosticta is typically a schooling fish in open pelagic waters and forms large schools in daytime. But in the reproductive period, at night and in twilight, when the spawning takes place, the schools break and males and females form separate pairs. The high body pickerel Spicaras maris of Black Sea live in schools outside spawning period, but during spawning and egg laying, males become strictly territorial whereas females retain schooling pattern. Similar behavioral modifications during the reproductive period are observed in sticklebacks and other species. In a cichlid fish, Haplochromis burtoni, one can observe a reverse pattern because they form schools for only a short period during reproduction. In Brachydonio rerio, a very quick transition from schooling to territorial and aggressive behavior occurs as a response to food stimuli. Even in Clupea herringus, an obligate schooling species, some fish move separately for some time during intense feeding in nearshore areas. The appearance of schooling behavior and its rejection in fish of same species may be caused by changes in ecological conditions. There is a clear tendency to schooling in homogeneous habitats, but an individual mode of life in more complex heterogeneous habitats. In schools of Tenecthis albonubes, the transition from coordinated swimming to aggressive contests between individuals is observed when the spawning or living areas become less available. In the nearshore pelagic waters, Elygenus navaja occurs only in shoals and exhibits a typically schooling behavior. But as the shoals approach nearshore habitats, they tend to disintegrate and individuals become solitary. When the fish go from shore into pelagic zone at low tide, Elygenus navaja easily retains schooling. The Atlantic cod Gadus moruha show a very similar pattern. In near shore widths it is solitary, but in open pelagic zone it forms big shoals. Demersal pelagic fishes Abudephduff sexatilis, Lutjanus graecius, Chromis cyanea, Chromis multilineata and Chromis chromis exhibit typical schooling behavior in mid-water, but these shoals disintegrate near bottom or when fish enter various shelters. In many fish species, only the young are schooling, whereas older individuals are solitary. This pattern is characteristic of Alquitans latifrons and Acanthorhodius asmusi, the young of which are schooling only before they reach body length less than about 5 cm. The young of the jewelfish Hemichromis bimaculatus are schooling, but 93 to 99 days after hatching, the schools break up and fish become solitary. An opposite behavior is observed in surgeonfish Acanthurus coeruleus and Acanthurus bahianus, in which young of these fishes are not schooling, whereas most adults aggregate into large schools. In some salmonids such as Oncorhynchus masua, Oncorhynchus sketta, Oncorhynchus mycis and Arctic grayling Thymalus arcticus, the transition to schooling is observed twice, during a very short term at larval stage as well as during smoltification and migration to sea. The salmonid fish going to feeding migration at sea retain a schooling pattern until they return into their native rivers for spawning, where they show territorial behavior. Approximately 50% of the yearlings of Notropis hudsonius swim in small shoals, whereas the rest swim alone in shallow waters. The distinction of facultative and obligate schooling species is difficult due to a very broad range of gradations from fish which cannot live outside shoals to those fish which do not form shoals even for very short time. There are fish such as young American char, Salvelinus fontinalis, which very easily go from group to territorial lifestyle with complex dominance relationships. The distinction between facultative and obligate schooling may be based on relative time during which the fish exhibit schooling behavior. Thus, it is possible to find all gradations of schooling from fish gathering into schools for only a very short period, mainly in the reproductive period, to fish which live only in schools. Increasing environmental homogeneity and separating fish from substrate bring about an increased socialization of fish schooling in pelagic waters. When environment is made more heterogeneous experimentally, the school integrity decreases. Thus, schooling behavior is an extremely important trait of many fish species and is observed more typically during early stages of fish ontogeny. Moving ahead, we discuss the second part of the topic, that is parental care in fishes. The term parental care describes any behavior performed by parents to improve the survival of young ones. This phenomenon is concerned with looking after the eggs or young ones until they are independent and to defend them from enemies and predators. It is well developed in several groups of fishes and is very important behavior for perpetuation of race. A number of fishes display parental care and one or both sexes are known to participate in the process. On the contrary, a large number of fish species do not care for their eggs but lay their eggs in sufficiently safer places and in large numbers, living spawning grounds unattended. Example of such careless behavior is provided by some carps. We will study the different forms of parental care widely exhibited by different fish species. The first one is formation of nest. The simplest form of nest building is exhibited by males of sunfishes, cichlids, salmons and darters. They make shallow basin-like nest for egg laying by the females. The stones and pebbles are removed from the nest by male and he keeps close watch over the eggs till hatching. The male of African lungfish Protopterus prepares nests by digging pit or oval holes at base of swamp grasses into which as many as 5,000 eggs are laid by several females. The male guards the eggs and young ones for nearly 8 weeks. The male of American lungfish Lepidosiren paradoxa prepare a tunnel-like burrow by gathering the debris. The nest is guarded by male parent till development is complete. The males increase the oxygen levels for the developing young ones by using gill-like structures developed during breeding season. These structures allow the male to release oxygen from his blood into surrounding nest and remove carbon dioxide. Male Amia calva construct crude circular nest among the aquatic plants. One or more females attend the nest for laying the eggs. Then the male fertilizes and guard the eggs till hatching. Newborns leave the nest under protective direction of male and swim with him for some time. Gobius, Rhodius and bullhead fish, instead of making nest, lays eggs in the empty shells of mollusks and male guards the eggs. Mistus singala and Mistus aor build nest of more or less circular depression excavated in dark clayed cell and eggs are laid by the female. The males attach the eggs to their abdomen by pressing against them and carry them till they are hatched. The male even feed them with milky secretion from the abdominal skin. The male three-spined stickleback fish constructs nest by collecting dead aquatic weeds which are joined together by sticky secretion produced from his kidneys. When the nest assumes a considerable size, the male makes the small tunnel. The male drags several mature females into this tunnel for laying eggs. After laying eggs, the female swims away and male guards over the fertilized eggs and take care of them until the development is over. The male fighting fish betta builds nests by producing small bubbles and mucus in his mouth. The blowing bubbles of air and sticky mucus adheres together to form a floating mass of dome-shaped foam. The eggs are collected by male in his mouth cavity and he throws them in such a way that eggs adhere to lower surface of the foamy nest. The second type is mouth cavity as shelter. It has been observed in some species that after fertilization, the eggs are kept in mouth and they grow within mouth cavity, showing mouth brooding. Such phenomenon is noticed in female cichlids, tilapia and males of Arius and Loricaria. Even after hatching, the fry utilizes mouth cavity as shelter at the time of danger. The third type of the parental care is coiling around eggs. In Follis, the eggs are rolled into a rounded ball and male parent guards the egg ball by coiling around it. Butterfish Follis gunellus lay their eggs in clumps of a few hundred. The eggs are fertilized and guarded by male until they hatch about 1 month later. The fourth type is attachment of eggs with bony hooks. The male Australian curtus attaches the mass of eggs on a hook-like projection on its forehead until hatching. The fifth type of parental care is formation of integumentary cups. In a catfish Platystechus, the nurturing for eggs is of advanced type. The skin of lower surface of female body gets soft and spongy during spawning season. Immediately after fertilization of eggs, the female presses her body against eggs in such a way that each egg becomes lodged in a small integumentary depression. The egg is attached inside the cup by an inconspicuous stalk and remains in this position till hatching. The sixth type is development of brood pouches. In seahorse and pipefish, male carries the eggs till hatching. In seahorses, female transfer the eggs into brood pouch of male. Male keeps them till hatching and also carries the young one for some time. The male pipefish grows flaps of skin underside which form a pouch to carry the fertilized eggs. The seventh type of parental care is formation of mermaid's purses. Sharks and rays forms mermaid's purses or egg capsules which are secreted by the shell glands of oviduct. They vary in shapes but perform the same function of protection. These are anchored to seaweeds by their long tendrils. Development occurs in them and young hatches out. The last type is viviparity. The highest degree of parental care is found in viviparous fishes where young develops within oviduct of the female. In dogfish Scoliodon and surffish Cymatogaster, the fertilization and development are internal. The nutrition is drawn by forming yolk sac placenta and young are born with characteristics of adult. In many sharks, the lining of uterus is glandular and thrown into long filamentous processes, the uterine villi. These villi are vascular and secrete a nutritive fluid which is absorbed by the embryo. In spiny butterfly rayfish, Pteroplatea, the uterine villi are long and they dip through spiracles of embryo into the pharynx. In addition to all these different types of parental care that we have studied, certain species care for their young ones. Families such as Gastrostidae, Ictaluridae and Centrarchidae does not stop with carrying of eggs but also defend their young ones. Merits and demerits of parental care. It improves survival and development of young ones. On contrary, it decreases parental survival, increases time until next breeding attempt and reduces future fecundity. Lastly, we study the third half of the topic, that is migration in fishes. Migration is a movement of fish involving long journey to definite area for definite purposes and return to the specific area from which they started. The fishes migrate in order to feed or to reproduce. Many types of fish migrate on a regular basis on time scales ranging from daily to annually or longer and over distances ranging from a few meters to thousands of kilometers. Most of the migration occurs at regular intervals and may be daily, monthly, seasonally, yearly, biannually or longer. The periodicity of migration varies between different species and even within a species and appears to be due to many biotic and abiotic initiating factors. Many species of fish wander annually through a particular area of ocean. Some are true migrants traveling regularly over great distances. Young fish usually leave the spawning grounds for areas where they develop into juveniles before joining adult stock at feeding grounds. Adults move to spawning grounds and then return to feeding grounds. Migratory patterns of fish are related to oceanographic factors and to currents. Eggs, larvae and young drift passively with current, although migration of adult fish toward breeding grounds is usually against the current. Adult movements are thus directional rather than passive and fish respond to environmental conditions such as climate. Information about the pattern of fish migration, its direction and speed of movement can be studied by marking and tagging fish followed by tracing records. The mark must be easily identifiable and must stay with till end of the study. Many types of such tags are developed for attachment to the fish for recognition. Here is the list of migratory fishes. Several fishes migrate for spawning and feeding. Some of them are cod, that is Gadus morua, herring, that is Clupia herringus, salmon, different salmo species, eel, that is Anguilla anguilla, Anguilla rostrata, Anguilla japonica, Anguilla bengalensis, etc. Hilsha, that is Hilsha ilicia, three-spined stickleback, that is Gasterosteus aculeatus, lampreys, that is Petromyzon marinus, and tunnas, that is Thunnus thynus. Types of migration. Migration may be of following types: alimentary migration in search of food and water, gametic migration for reproduction, climatic migration to secure more suitable climatic conditions, osmoregulatory migration for osmoregulation, and protective migration for protection. So, now let us understand the methods of migration. A fish can make migratory movements by several methods. By drifting, fishes are carried passively by water currents. This is called drift and may result in directional movements if the overall water movement is unidirectional. Random locomotory movement. Such random movements lead to a uniform distribution or to an aggregation. The spread out of fishes in all directions is termed dispersal. Orientation swimming movement. Fishes swim in a particular direction either towards or away from source of stimulation and at some angle to an imaginary line running between them and source of stimulation. Causes of migration. Several reasons of fish migration are to optimize feeding, to avoid unfavorable conditions, to enhance reproductive success, and possibly to promote colonization. Factors influencing migration. Several factors influence and control the process of migration in fishes. These are physical factors such as bottom materials, depth of water, temperature, light intensity, photoperiod, current, turbidity. Chemical factors such as salinity, pH, smell and taste of water, and biological factors such as sexual maturity, blood pressure, food, memory, physiological clock, endocrine glands and presence or absence of predators. Patterns of migration. There are 4 types of migration patterns observed in fishes. They are catadromous migration, anadromous migration, oceanodromous migration and potamodromous migration. We will describe each of this at depth. Starting with catadromous migration. The water course the fishes follow from the river to the sea for spawning is called catadromous migration. Catadromous fish spend most of their lives in fresh water and then migrate to sea to breed. Example of this type of migration is provided by 16 species of eels belonging to genus Anguilla. The best known are American eel and European eel. Both these eels spawn in warm saline waters of Atlantic. The fertilized eggs float for a particular period of time and young hatch out as pelagic larvae of eel. The larvae are called leptocephali, having a flat leaf-like body with small head. These tiny creatures are provided with elongated needle-like teeth to feed. They now begin their long homeward journey through Gulf Stream to shallow waters of continental shelves. When they are about 2.5 years old, a metamorphosis occurs. The leptocephali are transformed into alvors, that is glass eels, which are transparent, bottom dwelling, pigmented and ribbon-like. The needle-like teeth are lost and flattened body becomes cylindrical. The alvors, when attain about 2-3 years, start ascending the river in shoals to reach a suitable resting place. Here, the alvors feed and grow for some years to become yellow eels. The yellow eels live as much as 10 to 15 years before changing to silver eels, then swim downstream to sea, return to spawning grounds, that is Sargasso Sea, and die. Anadromous migration. Migration of the fishes from sea to fresh water for spawning is called anadromous migration. The adaptations of fishes to conditions of different habitats are precise, particularly with regard to salinity of water. Example of such migration is observed in true salmon, sea trout, sturgeon, tollyshed, hilsha, etc. Salmon, that is Salmo and Oncorhynchus, spawns in the cold clear waters of lakes or upper streams during November and December. The eggs are laid in gravel beds and the young of Atlantic salmon remain in fresh water for 2 to 3 years and sometimes as long as 6 years. Pacific salmon sometimes migrate to the sea in their first year. Adult fish usually remain in the sea for 2 or 3 winters and return to fresh water and spawn. During this period, they give up feeding and as a result they lose weight. The silvery color of the body is slowly replaced by a dull reddish brown tint and the skin on back changes to thick. After spawning, the fishes make return journey to the sea. Some Atlantic salmon die in fresh water after a single spawning. The salmons do not spawn more than 3 times in their lifespan of 8 to 9 years. The tagging of salmon has shown that European types may cross from Norway to Scotland as well as rivers. Oceanodromous migration. The movement of marine fishes within sea for breeding is called oceanodromous migration. Oceanodromous fishes occur widely throughout the world's oceans, living and migrating wholly in the sea. They differ mainly from one another by method and extent of their migration. Examples: cords, tunas and herrings. Herring, that is Clupea herringus, Extensively known for its economic importance, are best oceanodromous type and can be classified into several populations or local races that do not mix with each other freely. Each has a particular migratory behavior. In North Sea, distinct groups spawn in different seasons and in different grounds. The diversity of migration and of reproductive seasons is closely connected with annual cycle of oceanographic conditions in North Sea. Cod, that is Geddes muruja, have migration patterns similar to those of herring. The migrations of other fish cover even greater distances. For example, the Atlantic white tuna, Gurmo alalunga, are found in winter around the Azores and Canary Island, where they spawn in spring. Then they migrate to Gulf of Gascogne and to waters around Iceland in July. Potamodromous migration. The migration of freshwater fishes within fresh water for breeding is called potamodromous migration. Truly migratory fishes remain confined to fresh water and they travel long distance in large rivers in search of spawning grounds. After egg laying at suitable places, they return to the feeding area. Potamodromous migration is noticed in carps and trouts. At the end, we summarize the lecture. Schooling is an extremely important adaptation at the social level that ensures the survival of fish and its most vital functions. Even though this behavior originated independently in many groups of teleost fishes, it has many similarities across different species. Such common universal characteristics include high level of phenotypic homogeneity of fish in schools and their equipotentiality. Parental care is an inborn instinctive behavior shown by different species of fishes. A number of fishes provide parental care to their eggs and young ones, whereas others do not care for their eggs but lay their eggs in sufficiently safer places in large numbers. Great diversity of parental care is found in fishes, ranging from formation of basin-shaped simple nest to viviparity and taking care of hatchlings. Migration in fish is adaptation to abundance, and large number of fishes undergoes migration for having separate spawning, nursery and feeding grounds. Many species of fishes undertake migration from sea to fresh waters and vice versa, depending upon their betterment involving sensory mechanism. Thank you.